Welcome to On Democracy with F.P. Wellman. I am Fred Wellman, your host. We're off to another great show this week. Got a great guest. But before we start, as always, I always like to grab a current poll that kind of lays things out and actually kind of frames my conversation with my guest. And just yesterday or this week, NBC News released a new one that is examining Republican primary voters. And in many ways, it's kind of shocking, but it really shows the great divide we face. And in this first slide, we'll show on your screen if you're listening at home, it starts at the top, GOP primary voters. Would you vote for a candidate who, number one, supports sending military to stop drugs at the border? A whopping plus 80 want to send troops to the border. Plus 58 support the idea of a K through 8 ban on sex or gender discussions, which is the don't say gay stuff. Amongst GOP primary voters, a plus 58 differential want us to ban that discussion. 47 want to ban Biden's climate energy programs, plus 51 ban gender affirming care for minors, and then plus 22 on a 6-week abortion ban. Now, the next set of questions they ask is really where it gets interesting. Contrary to what the loudest voices in the MAGA movement tell us, an overwhelming majority of GOP primaries don't support cutting off aid to Ukraine. They don't support attacking companies like, I don't know, Disney for their LGBT views, and they certainly don't support Social Security and Medicare cuts. As a matter of fact, for support for Medicare, more aid to Ukraine, it was a minus 24, so the majority of Republicans support that. A shocking minus 42 say they want to punish companies for LGBTQ statements. In other words, Ron DeSantis' battle with Disney for GOP primary voters is not a game-winning message. And then that amazing minus 47 differential for wanting to cut Social Security and Medicare. Now, it's not all good news. Plus 11 want us to say Trump won, and plus 5 want pardons for our riders. Now, where I thought it was getting interesting before we get to the show with this last one is they actually brought in independents, split them out. And this is where we kind of see the gap. And I don't want to talk about how different it is with Democrats. But, they have to get some independents. So we're there on this one. Everywhere across, the closest they came, independents to Republicans, sadly, was minus 3 independents support the idea of banning K through 8 discussions of sex and gender. But beyond that, it's double-digit separations for the most part. So what does it mean? Well, I mean, obviously it means bad news for Ron DeSantis. His whole personality is fighting Disney and making America Florida, a theme we've talked about in the show several times the last few weeks, and is roundly rejected every time it's pitched to people. But it also shows us, to me, this large divide. And I think a lot of times we'll see you see a national poll and say, well, plus 60 support LGBTQ rights and all. But then you divide it and find it's actually 90 Democrats and 30 Republicans. And that is important. And it's important, the discussion we're about to have with Jeff Sharlet. So I'm not going to waste our time with my polls. Let's get on with the show. Let's talk. Welcome. As I said, welcome back. We got some music. I joked a few weeks ago about getting Odessa music. I'm actually talking to them. So I don't know. Matt's going to have to sell some, candy or something to raise enough money, but we're going to try and get some real music. We met the band when we were in Montreal. So I don't know, Matt, have faith. I'm on the job. We're going to find it. But in the meantime, we got our great welcome. I am, as we mentioned, Fred Wellman, your host. This is On Democracy. You're in the right place. So glad you're here. It's been another fascinating week with a semi-rebellion in Russia for about 15 minutes. RFK Jr. did a bunch of push-ups. That was cool. CNN, now here we're really good. CNN released the actual tape of Trump bragging about waiving classified documents as civilians. And that's a great place to start. Jeff, welcome to the show. Jeff is a New York Times national best-selling, multi-award winning author of 8 books, many articles in top journals. His newest book is right here in front of me if you're watching. His newest book is The Undertow: Scenes from a Slow Civil War. He is the Frederick Sessions Beebe 35 professor in the art of writing at Dartmouth College. I'm not going to list all the places his writing goes. It goes everywhere, Jeff. My God, you're everywhere. But what's really interesting, Jeff's been on the ground in the MAGA movement for years now, offers one of the most unique insights in that world that I've seen anywhere. I heard you on NPR a couple of weeks ago, Jeff, and I had to have you on the show. So welcome to On Democracy, brother.
Thank you, Fred.
I want to start that latest moment we just talked about at the beginning there and kind of reel it back from there. And the audio of Trump waving classified papers at guests at his crappy golf club is damning to most Americans. I mean, he literally refers to the dog. Well, you see, this is secret. I can't show it to you. But what's interesting to me is always how Republicans close ranks, coming up from excuses like we don't know those are actual plans. It could have been a newspaper clipping. To I think one congressman said, well, that's just Trump being Trump, And it gets me to something you said in that first NPR interview that I heard. You said you can't fact check a myth. And it's almost like Trump lives in a magical bubble of mythology that's impervious to facts, right? How is it that Trump followers are so implacably immobile off their adulation for him? And you've been going to MAGA rallies. And what's your thoughts on the way that bubble never seems to burst?
I mean, the bubble doesn't burst because the appeal of authoritarianism, of Trumpism, you want to use, you said we could drop F-bombs, fascism.
Yeah,
the real dirty F word.
We use it on the show all the time, man.
Yeah, it's a real dirty F word. And the appeal is aesthetic. It's not reasoned. It's not and it's not even pretending to be that. It's a national myth, right?
Right.
And these are people who've decided, I find meaning in myth. Now, they find meaning there, right? If you find meaning in a thing, you're not interested in the quibbles over the details. It also means the way myth works. You go to the scholars of myth, they understand that we can encounter the same story with radically different meanings. So you can't fact check a myth. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't.
Right.
But also, listen, if some MAGA person is going to hear that recording, and they're probably not. That's
right.
The other thing.
They want to break.
Why do Republicans defend it? They don't need to. The
right.
base is paying attention.
It's not being run on Fox News. It's not being run on OAM.
Yeah, if they happen to hear it, they're going to hear it positively. They're going to hear their man being funny from their point of view, charming, charismatic. They're going to hear him dominating the room. They're going to hear him being a strong man. And that's what they're in it for. So how do you say, hey, that guy is breaking the law? And they're, yes. That's what I'm here for. I'm here for a man who governs from his gut. I'm not here for some code section 3.2b. They're not there for that.
I love that perspective because we say that a lot, right? We say one of the reasons DeSantis is failing, right, is DeSantis isn't funny. I know that sounds, people think I'm crazy when I say that to him, Jeff. Is like the thing about Donald Trump that's so unnerving, I think, to a lot of people who dislike him is he's actually charming. He's actually funny. He's got his own. Now, look, I hate his humor, and I hate the people that are often the punchlines of his jokes. Right? It's like those racist jokes, but there are people that they love. Right? And the thing about Donald Trump is he's built his entire life around marketing Donald J. Trump. And you're right. There is a certain charisma to that, and he knows how to read a crowd, right? He knows. I mean, Tim Miller was on the show last week. Talked about how where Trump develops policies is during a MAGA rally, where he kind of sees what lines hit, what lines don't, and he's a master of pulling. Like he can hear the vote. You know what I mean? When he says a line and the crowd reacts with jubilation, he's like, "Okay, that's a new policy. We're going to kill the drug dealers." Okay, that's not, but they love it. The crowd goes crazy, and that mythology. And you've been ensconced in that. I mean, I've read the book, and I'm going to jump out. The God help me with my script this week. The book is, for those, you gotta get this book, y'all. Just want to say that it's called The Undertow. It's a travelogue, a fascinating travelogue into this world of MAGA. And I don't know how you did it. I was reading this section this last night where the guy had came out with guns on his hips, and you were in Wisconsin, I believe, and you wandered up to the guy's house and, hey, how come you have an FJB bag? I'm like, I live in Missouri. I couldn't just imagine rolling up to one of these houses and say, hey, what's the deal? And they come out with guns. And I mean, tell me about your travels, why you took that mission, and some of the what you learned the most as you knocked on these doors and heard these voices.
Yeah. Well, I've been writing about right-wing movements for about 20 years. And this book, The Undertow, represents about the last 10 years.
Right.
And I have to say, originally it was going to be mainly about the last 10 years, and then January 6th, 2021. And so that becomes the big part of the book, actually, is traveling after that and seeing, after Trump is gone, how present he is, how present that story is. And as you say, you're talking there in Wisconsin about a militia leader named Rob Rum. He claims 5,000 members of his militia. I doubt it. But there is a militia, and there's a whole hell of a lot of guns, body armor, cases of ammunition, and the corner of his rooms looping his footage from January 6th. And it wasn't fuck Joe Biden, it was fuck Trudeau. And I'm in Wisconsin, so I stopped to take a picture thinking that's interesting. I didn't know I had tripped two of his security perimeters. And, man comes out with a gun and invites you in. I actually think the right answer is yes.
I'm over here shaking my head. If you're listening, I'm like, I'm rubbing my forehead. I'm literally rubbing my forehead.
No man with a gun. But also, that's the conversation. Look, the reality is someone who's flying a flag, what I have found, and that's a big part of how traveling is easy. You just drive until you see someone with a flag, and then you say, tell me about that. And there's so many of these right-wing flags. Yeah. You fly a flag because it's almost sort of like you're saying, ask me about my crazy politics.
That's a
and I think I don't recommend this for everybody, and I do not mean this. And I do not mean this, hey, look, we can have conversations. This isn't safe. These people aren't safe. Some of them flying, if they're flying a flag with an AR-15 on it, you understand where they're coming from. But you understand a bit of where they're coming from, and I needed to know more. And to me, I just always find I'm not of the right myself, not any variation of it.
Right.
But I find its spectrum really fascinating. And that we were just talking about fact checking and myth. I think mythology is interesting. Mythology, stories that people tell. There's a famous writer, Joan Didion. She's got this line: "We tell ourselves stories in order to live." Right? Yeah. And she's got all these fans who say, "Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's wonderful." Well, depends on what story. Trump's stories are stories that people are telling themselves in order to live. And the thing about him being funny. So I started going to Trump rallies pretty early on. Yeah. And I couldn't get an editor to send me this. I was like, he comes down that golden escalator, right?
Right.
And I'm like, I've seen, this is the strong man figure that I've reported on overseas. Here it is descending into our midst, right? Yeah. I go to my regular editors and like, no, Jeff, you can't write about Trump. We're covering that as a funny story, and you're not funny enough. Which is fair. I'm not. And
don't you write about music a lot too?
You're the wrong guy. But what I could do, actually, because I was interested in performance, I could understand the funny people couldn't understand how he was funny to his crowd. The people who were telling jokes to the MSNBC audience didn't understand this is working a different vein. So you have to spend a lot of time in the right. But then you also, this I'll say, you want to understand Trump's comedy. Watch a speech without sound. And a lot of people do that and they say, oh, it's Mussolini. No, it's not. It's Jackie Mason. It's Borscht Belt comedy. It's there's an old Borscht Belt, Jewish humor. You're from Missouri. You might not know.
I grew up in the New England, though. So my dad's from Boston. So
okay, you know it. It's funny because it's sad because it's funny. What Trump is doing, he's taking that formula. It's funny because it's mad. It's funny because it's angry, and it's angry because it's funny. But you stand in those crowds, and I found myself laughing, and then I'm horrified at myself. But that's the control he has. Wow. Of the crowd, the timing, everything about it it's not always on. He stumbles plenty.
Right.
But that's also kind of what we show this guy. Like this guy didn't work. Didn't work today. Doesn't matter. I'll go back on stage tomorrow and I'll pull it off. And
God, what a great perspective.
Ron DeSantis is not that guy.
No.
Nikki Haley is not that person. Tim Scott, no. We live in the Trumpocene, in the vernacular of Trump, the age of Trump, and politicians are going to succeed in as much as they are able to work in that vernacular, not just the policy beats, but the comedy beats, the fear beats.
Wow, it's not often this show I sit back on my chair and go, oh yeah. Shit, I didn't think of that. You're absolutely right. It is because we have talked about that. I think a lot of us kind of drag him for it is just like you said, the old time comedy. Which, by the way, if you watch that old time comedy, a lot of it is super racist and a lot of super abusive. That's the thing, and that is Donald J. Trump. Really, what a unique perspective on it, and it's true, and it works. And it's funny. I think this is where DeSantis fails, is he thinks it's about the anger and the hate is there, but there's the package that goes with that has created a mythology that is hard to compare. I think I've talked about a poll a few times in the show. I want to say it was 3 or 4 weeks ago now. Maybe Matt could find it, but there was a poll where basically 30% 50% of these GOP primary voters said that they simply would vote for Trump or they would vote for no one, or, you know, even if he's not in the ballot, it's always going to be Trump. So there's literally a third of an electorate that said, I want just this guy and no one else, period, dot. And that's a unique place. And in that one of those ways, you did talk to this lady. I remember I read a scene where you, for some reason, it stuck to me. Diane, you were at the Trump rally, right? And then you went to her car. I love your stories. Like, yeah, so we sat in her car in the parking lot. I'm just like going, hell, dude. And the things. I mean, if you read the book, the scenes you find yourself in are as entertaining to me as anything else. Like, there was so many times I'm like, oh my God, this guy's nuts. Like, God bless, this guy's nuts. But what was interesting to me is that listening to her, she's obsessed with Trump as a messenger of God. I mean, she hears him. She's telling you, like, don't you hear that? Don't you see it? And you're like, well, these are random numbers. Yes. And that's the code. The random numbers, the code. It's like these people see Trump, many of them, as a messenger of God, and he's talking to them. I mean, how does that fever take a normal? Because didn't you say? I think Diane was actually she was anti-Trump. One of them was. Forgive me. My brain
Diane was. How does where does this? Who's the main figure in my book was her favorite president before Trump was Obama. And I think a lot of people don't want to believe that exists. I'm in Vermont. There are Bernie to Trump folks. There is a left to right slide now into. I mean, fascism has a big gravitational pull. It's like a tractor beam, and it can bring in all kinds of folks. But Diane G, Sunrise, Florida, Broward County, rallied about 20,000 folks. And I got to talking to Diane G, and at that point I was interested in learning more about QAnon. Right. And she was a real devotee. And so we kind of hang out at the rally, and then afterwards we meet up, and we say we sit in her white Cadillac. We stay there until the parking lot was empty, talking about the deep truths. And some of the later, when I listened to the recording of the conversation, I remember thinking, I can't use some of this. It's just too crazy. It's just too fringe. And then I would Google it. For instance, her claim that the terrible mass shooting in Las Vegas, where some 50-some people were killed, was actually an assassination attempt by the Saudis on Trump. And you're like, what? And her evidence is, well, there was a man seen on the same floor, and he had been seen earlier eating Turkish kebab. And, well, you've got it. And I thought, this is too crazy. And then I Google it, and where do I find it? On Tucker Carlson, coming from Congressman Scott Perry, a former brigadier general, via another Trump official. And you realize this isn't fringe. I'm fringe. You're fringe. We are the fringe here. That the lunacy of these ideas are such that they make their own reality. But now here's the catch. The thing about Diane G that I found heartbreaking, I really do, and I think not enough people realize that. Diane G, I write about her. She's involved with a children's home in Haiti, and she has seen the massive destruction in Haiti. And she saw even the harm caused by the Bill Clinton Foundation. The Clinton Foundation did this work in Haiti and was really mismanaged. Yeah. And it wasn't evil intention. It was just, they sent off like 22-year-old Ivy League graduates to run a country that they knew nothing about. Surprise, they failed. Yep. It was, hubris. And Clinton himself acknowledges this. He says it was a deal with the devil and it didn't go as we planned. But so there's all kinds of stuff going on there. But Diane G doesn't have the language. She doesn't have the political sophistication to understand that. She's got a whole history of American racist mythology about voodoo in Haiti and this kind of stuff to tap into. And then she's got QAnon. Well, did you know that the Clintons eat babies? Yeah. She has seen children's lives destroyed. And so suddenly she takes that fact that she's witnessed, and she takes that myth and she grafts them together, and it makes sense. It's almost as if she's translating it. So many of these lunatic ideas are translations of realities that are horrible, that we could address, that we could debate about, that we could be speaking to, but they're translations into a fantastical realm that it's very hard to come back from. And they vote. Right. I mean, and in the end, it's a vote. And it does take me, kind of takes me to that mythology. I think the next piece would be the way Ashley Babbitt is laced through your book.
as a martyr of their movement. You know, you said, I've seen you say, I've heard you say twice now, I think, that you knew almost as soon as it happened with her death. And I love the way you frame it, that if the only video we have is her coming through the window and then the gun comes up and shoots her, and the gun had a black hand holding it.
Yeah.
And you knew at that moment, like many of us did, I think, that and how does that translate into what you saw as you journeyed through this work?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit. I think that moment brought us in this age of Trump into an age of martyrs. And Trump before that had been trying to create martyrs.
Yeah, right.
People who had been killed by undocumented folks, but didn't quite take. But now here was video, and she was perfect. You know, she's this young white woman, a veteran, leading this charge on the Capitol on January 6th. People say, Tucker Carlson would say she's unarmed, but your viewers can see that's her knife on the cover.
Yeah.
And people say, well, that's just a utility knife. You know, try taking it onto an airplane and see how that goes.
Yeah.
And she was there by her own account to storm the Capitol. She was there to do damage. She was a domestic terrorist. But the hands that shoot her are Capitol police officers, black man, Lieutenant Michael Byrd. And I mean, as soon as you see that, if you've been paying attention in America, I mean, this is the awful part of our heritage. This is the lynching lie. This goes back. Probably most viewers, listeners haven't seen a movie called Birth of a Nation. But if you've ever seen a Hollywood movie, you've seen its influence. 1915, epic by D.W. Griffiths. This is the template for Hollywood.
Yep.
A white woman fleeing to her death from a black monster, and she leaps off a cliff rather than be ravaged by him, and thus setting in motion the ride of the Ku Klux Klan, which are the heroes of the movie. This, by the way, is the first movie screened in the White House, 1915, Woodrow Wilson. They thought it was great. And that's an old story. So would they do it? And I mean, I can't say I knew the second I saw that they would do it.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to start looking. And by that evening, there they were describing Ashley Babbitt, this 35-year-old woman, as smaller and smaller, younger and younger, an innocent little white girl killed. And Lieutenant Michael Byrd, he gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, it's almost like a children's story. Yeah. And, you know, then you get spin-off martyrs. One of my favorite is a guy who was arrested. He was briefly a comedic moment when the FBI showed up to arrest him. He was wearing a T-shirt that said, "I was there, Washington, D.C., January 6, 2021. But what wasn't funny was the plan he had discussed with others online to avenge the little girl, the innocent little girl, Ashley Babbitt, with a noose. That the proper way to punish Michael Byrd was with a noose. And the reason they were going to do this is they didn't want to be racist, you know. The reason they were going to do this is that way they wouldn't have to fire a shot. And so they could say, hey, we didn't fire the first shot. The liberals, the lefties, the rhinos, they did. We are innocents. And that, look, here's the thing. The takeaway from that and that mythology and how that works is we like to think sometimes of these guys as a death cult. I mean, they put skulls on everything, you know, the Punisher's skull, the arm to the teeth. Right. I think a better way to understand them is as an innocence cult. And you say, what? They're not innocents. No, of course they're not. As an innocent, they fetishize the idea of innocence, the idea that you could stand with a gun outside of school and somehow you're the persecuted one.
Right.
The idea of innocent Ashley Babbitt, the way they insist that she was unarmed. She has to be innocent. The way that Trump is always going to be innocent, no matter what he did. It's not so much if he stands out and shoots on Fifth Avenue and kills someone. It's not even, they don't even have to deny that he did it. He did it for a good reason. He is innocent of evilness and wickedness and so on. Yeah. That's the myth that I wanted to, and it did, you know, and so I traveled across the country, crisscrossing the country, just talking to people, everyday people about Ashley Babbitt. I had no destination. I had no, I'm going to check off this list of important persons.
Yeah,
we have enough.
It like you wandered. It seems like it's sometimes, I mean, literally that's the theme I saw a lot. I was like, well, I ended up, how often I see that. So, yeah.
Well, and I think this is a lot of what the media is getting wrong is we do need more wandering journalism, and we need to pay attention to these little small stories. It's Diane G in the parking lot. Yeah. Seems crazy. Each little bit, though, is making this big, broad fabric of fascism. And instead, why on earth do political reporters turn after the Trump tape that comes out? I don't need to hear what Ted Cruz has to say about this.
Right. It doesn't matter.
I don't need to go to a diner either. I need you to wander and let that come up in conversation if it does, and hear how it's experienced. That's what I kind of feel that's politically imperative right now.
I'm going to take a pause there. That's a great place to take a pause for some of our sponsors, then come back, and I want to go right into a discussion of that disconnect right there. Cold turkey may be great on sandwiches, but there's a better way to break your bad habits. And I'm not talking about some weird mind voodoo or a wacky message board. No, we're talking about our sponsor, Fume, and they look at the problem in a different way. Now, not everything in a bad habit is bad. So instead of a drastic, uncomfortable change, why not just remove the bad from your habit? Fume is an innovative, award-nominated device that does just that. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of chemicals, Fume uses all natural, delicious flavors. You get it. Instead of bad, Fume is good. It's a habit you're free to enjoy and makes replacing your bad habit easy. Your Fume comes in an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing anxiety while breaking your bad habit. The first time I used Fume, I was shocked at how flavorful and fresh it tasted. It's easy to hold and perfectly balanced, and quite honestly, extremely fun to fidget with. The real wood material and sleek design definitely classes it up, and I feel pretty darn cool holding it. Stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and honestly, even fun. Fume has served over 100,000 customers and has thousands of success stories. There's no reason that can't be you. So join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up the Journey Pack today. Now, head to tryfume.com and use code FRED to save 10% when you get the Journey Pack today. That's tryfum.com and use code FRED to save an additional 10% off your order today. Let's stop cutting down trees to make toilet paper. I mean, it's true. Humans are cutting down tens of thousands every day just to supply the American need for toilet paper. And the worst part is that when you use trees for toilet paper, it's just one use and done. It can't be reused or recycled. It just goes straight into our water system. That's why I made the switch to real paper. Real is 100% bamboo. So we're using a plant that grows fast, can be harvested and regenerated like grass on a lawn, and doesn't impact entire ecosystems of forest. Real is the best kind of eco-friendly product because it doesn't feel like you're sacrificing something to help the earth. In fact, honestly, it feels like an upgrade. I'm really busy these days, so it's great to have it shipped free to my door in a plastic-free packaging. And I can schedule it on a subscription so that it comes exactly when I need it. And y'all, I'm super forgetful, as anyone who knows me knows, so I don't have to worry about picking it up at the store where I always forget. I'm a bit of an environmentalist myself too, so I love that Real is now a partner with One Tree Planted. And with every box of Real that you buy, they're funding reforestation efforts across the country. So unlike other toilet paper products that cuts down trees, Real is actually helping to plant trees. Now, Real paper is available in easy, hassle-free subscriptions or for one-time purposes on their website. All orders are conveniently delivered to your door with free shipping and 100% recyclable, plastic-free packaging. Now, if you head to realpaper.com/Fred, sign up for a subscription using my code FRED at the checkout, you'll automatically get 30% off your first order and free shipping. So that's realpaper.com/Fred, or just enter the promo code FRED. Get 30% off your first order plus free shipping. Let's make a change for good this year. Switch to Real Paper. Real is paper for the planet. We have great sponsors. I'm so blessed. Regular theme I talk about, picking up what you talked about, how the national media just doesn't seem to get the answer, doesn't see the issue. And as regard, I think Jeff Rubin wrote a piece this week about how the cable news has turned into news aggregation. And I saw it myself. As the Prigozhin column was marching to Moscow, CNN was running a whole piece on the submersible 2 days after everybody died. It's like they just don't need better. Yeah, it's like, oh shit, we got major breaking news and they're unable to break from their entertainment. So, but a regular thing I talk about the show too is my frustration with the easy dismissal by so many in the actually my script says the DC Democratic establishment, but you really to get to it, it is the media establishment, it is the political professionals of what they call culture war issues, or what they call, they don't want to talk about fascism. I say constantly the culture war is a real war with actual casualties. The issues they want to avoid talk about are it gets me so mad. And I hear, well, we don't want to talk about that because it sidetracks us from the important things like the economy. Those things are literally killing people, in places like Missouri and Wisconsin and stuff. What do you see as you've seen both sides now. What's the disconnect between, is there a dissonance? Is there a history of this dissonance? I mean, what's your take on that I would say cognitive dissonance between the reality we face in much of the country versus what are those in power may see otherwise?
Well, the subtitle of the book, Culture War, and we were talking before the show, this term comes into prominence from Pat Buchanan.
Right.
I think is 92. Was it 92 or 88? 92.
Perhaps.
No. I'm sorry. It was 88, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was right there, right?
The speech at the RNC. Yeah.
Yes.
And Pat Buchanan somehow gives us the language with which the Democratic establishment talks about this. The media talks about this. This was a guy who admired General Franco, the Spanish fascist dictator. This is not someone that we need to look to for cues.
Right.
And so I call it a slow civil war. And the reason I call it a slow civil war is in the spring of 21, I started here. I'm married to an academic historian. I know the historians are very cautious.
Yeah.
They know that history moves slow, but I started hearing other historians using that term as a possibility for the first time. And I said, okay, if these folks are taking it seriously, I, again, talk to the press. Are you crazy? Now we're comfortable doing that. But so I started traveling, and I pretty quickly found I didn't even have to ask the question. I just had to say civil war, and people would say yes. There was sort of two answers. Yes, it's coming. I'm looking forward to it. Or yes, it's coming. It's sad, but it has to happen. I'm talking about MAGA.
Yeah, of course.
And whether that means it's going to happen or not, that's something you sort of have to pay attention to. And that cognitive dissonance, though, I think part of it has to do with the fear of looking marginal, the fear of paying attention to something that's not serious. One of the things whenever I cover Trump rallies, I've never gone as press. I've never used a press pass. I get my ticket the honest way, which means I get endless spam from Trump for the rest of my life.
God bless you. Just for that alone, thanks for taking it for the team.
And then I stand in line for 6 hours, and then we stand and we wait and so on. The media, if people don't realize at Trump rallies, go in a metal pen, and he puts it in the middle. Yep. So that at some point in the rally, he'll say, look at those scum. And everyone turns around and flies the bird. And it's it's great pure wrestling match, and they're existing as a prop. But what was most astonishing to me, especially going back to 2016, every rally opened with a preacher. And I covered the Christian right. And so I knew these guys were hardcore. And I look back at the press, and maybe they're on the phone. This isn't important. We know Trump's not pious, so therefore they're not even paying attention. And I'm like, how can you cover this thing? They still don't. We saw that Trump speech after the indictment. You show me the mainstream press that picked up the big new changes in that. One, the really huge growth in anti-Semitism. He ended the speech. The last lines were, we're going to chase out the globalists, drive out the communists. That's the Gospel of John and the Gospel of Matthew is the money changers. And just to make sure you get it, the two verbs that are used in the different Gospels, his speechwriter has put in, money changers is Jews. I talked to colleagues in the press, well, you don't know that.
Yeah.
You can't be sure. And I'm like, you're going to have to, you have no problem speculating on a submersible, speculating on the fate of a submersible. How about you speculate, you bring your knowledge to bear on democracy right now. And and identify what you see. And I think our political press is not up to the job. I thought it might be different. I see some folks who are stepping up now, but I heard that same CNN segment. It was Anderson Cooper leads off with the submersible as the Russian coup was happening. And I'm like, what is going on?
What is happening? We couldn't even change our script. And I had sold on O'Brien on the show several months ago. We should rerun that one, Matt. We should like just put that back out again. And that was, sold. I was passionate about that. She's a former CNN anchor talking about, how we're failing. I say it all the time. We are going to, I call it, I use the term a lot, that we're going to norm and tradition ourselves into fascism, right? And because nobody wants to say, well, that's a lie or that's fascism. And because, it's just against norms and traditions of propriety. And our opponents, our enemies, if you will, don't care about propriety. They don't care about.
Well, this is what's fascinating to me about Never Trumpers. And I've learned this from, I have to admit, I appreciated the work you guys were doing before,
Thanks.
but talking to you guys around this book and then talking to so many, I'll go and I'll talk to a New York Times reporter, a political reporter, Reed Epstein. I don't mind naming him. And he's scolding me for using the F word and the R word, fascism and racism. Jeez. Now, you can say maybe that was a racist act, but you can't say that, this is a little bit like I teach my kids. Don't say someone's a jerk, say they're being jerky, Focus
on the behavior.
But this is a little bit different. Then I talked to the Never Trumpers, and you all know that the center didn't hold because for you guys, the world exploded. It means losing job opportunities, social connections, and so on. The center, that so much of the political establishment is dreaming that they can hold on to, the Never Trumpers know is already gone.
Yep.
And I think I'm coming from a pretty left place, but this is not the left right of Glenn Greenwald and whoever his latest chat buddy is,
right?
Elon Musk or whatever.
David Sachs.
This is people saying, "Hey, look, we value democracy, and we understand that is collapsing right now."
Well, it was a regular joke at Lincoln Project about who we'd bunk with in the gulag. And since my son worked for me, I said, look, you're 25. You got to sleep up top because I'm too old to climb up top. And looking back, I'm like, God, that actually wasn't very funny in the big picture. But, well, I think, too, one of the things I just heard in your conversation as we were talking and what got in my mind is these guys do these things. Trump says these things and others. And there's two questions on this topic is and the troops are listening, although it often feels like people who are at the top don't really understand. I mean, did Trump know they'd storm the Capitol, right? You know what I'm saying? Was that his intent? I mean, I think they understand. It seems like a lot of these guys, and I'll use the example I have in my notes is Rick Scott's bizarre video this week. I don't know if you saw Rick Scott put out a 35-second video of him saying, consider this a travel warning for Florida. Oh, yeah. We don't want socialists and communists to come to our state, right? And it was just so, what a fucking dweeb, it was just so stupid. He's such a weirdo. But again, we literally have a moment where they're actual Nazis demonstrate, which they deny, right? Oh, those are feds. But there's actual Nazis flying Nazi flags outside Disney World or on top of bridges in Orlando or elsewhere. And you've got a senator who is not dumb by any. He was a multi-billionaire CEO, a criminal. But this reminds me, I worked on an organization briefly that was focused on the Beer Hall Project, called the Beer Hall Project. And it focused on how comparing the Beer Hall Putsch and the era after the Beer Hall Putsch to today's era, right? Like everybody says, oh, January 6th is our Beer Hall. Yeah, I think it was. And that's not a good thing, by the way, because there's a lot of people who don't understand that wasn't the end of Hitler, right? That was the rise of Hitler. That was actually the moment where, like January 6th, where he actually became a different thing. He became a myth. He actually took on the establishment, and that begins. And they encouraged his brown shirts to fight the Bolsheviks in the streets. I mean, do you think people like Rick Scott do they know what the people? So then we go to the book where you were out there, you hung out with who will be the foot soldiers in the Civil War. Do you think there's a disconnect between the generals of the Civil War, the Rick Scotts and the Clay Higgins and the Diane G's and the Waltz that you met?
I mean, I think the interesting thing is increasingly less of a disconnect. There's Rick Scott. He's trying to do his best. He's saying he is listening to his constituents. Weird. He's trying to do constituent service and say, hey, the people lead and I follow, and I'm going to follow those people with the Nazi flags. And I think there's that element, there's another, to speak of the German analogy, and I don't like to go too far with that because then people say, but this isn't like Germany in 1935. No, it's America in 2023.
Yeah.
It's not a fascist regime, which is what Germany was. It's a fascist.
Not originally, though. It was a fascist movement.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's like, yeah.
But fascism evolves and adapts, and there's a very kind of History Channel perspective that says that, between 1945 and now, there's no fascism. Tell it to Indonesia, one of the larger countries in Asia, which was under fascism for a long time into the 21st century. So Rick Scott doing that, but you mentioned Clay Higgins, Representative Clay Higgins, Republican Louisiana.
Yep.
And Clay Higgins is interesting because there's no disconnect there.
No.
Clay Higgins doesn't wink at fascist groups. He proudly brags of being a member of an organization called the Three Percenters. Just to give you perspective on these guys, they're actually labeled a terrorist group in Canada. They've been linked to bombings. They believe that 3% of Americans fought the revolution. It's bullshit. It was 25, 26%.
Yep.
But it's actually a terrorist ideology.
Yep.
If you believe you need only 3% to overthrow a regime, and that's where they're coming from. Yep. So he put out a tweet a couple of weeks ago after the arraignment, and everyone had a good old time making fun of it. It makes no sense. This is like 1/50th know your bridges. This guy is gobbledygook. Unless you spend time with folks like the man I mentioned, Rob Rum, militia leader, or the militia churches I went to in Nebraska and California, churches with their own militias, you want to know your bridges. I mean, know your bridges means it doesn't mean bomb the bridges to Miami. Are they going to do that? No. It means hunker down in your county. This is something called the Constitutional Sheriffs Movement, which something like 40% of sheriffs in the United States subscribe to in some part now.
Yep.
This ridiculous idea that the sheriff is the highest law authority in the land and can nullify any law he wants. Know your bridges so the feds can't come in. 1/50th. What does that mean?
Secure the choke points.
Military scale map.
I did a video about it.
And it's a little bit, there's something, it's very reassuring. It's reassuring to fact check a myth. I write that in the book when a militia church leader in Yuba City, California is telling me that it's no coincidence that I came to his church. Says there is no word for coincidence in the Bible. So I called up actually a Hebrew scholar, like the man who writes on ancient Hebrew.
Yeah.
And he's like, of course there is.
Right.
He's like, that's ridiculous. And it's very satisfying, when an expert flattens a lie like that. I didn't go back to Yuba City. I'm pretty sure they weren't going to say, oh, gosh, thank you for the correction. Right.
Right.
They're out there building this story, this narrative. You get a signal like Rick Scott. That's a license. I think Rick Scott, I'm no legal scholar, but given what has happened, that's an invitation to violence. That's saying to Floridians, hey, I've got your back. I'm giving you the blessing of authority. You think someone's a socialist or a communist? Have at it.
Go ahead. You're empowering them. That's a great place for our second break. And then I really want to talk about that. As you know, I have a big family, and that means there's usually a lot of garbage left over by the end of the week. And frankly, I used to feel really guilty about it. But then I got a Lomi. Now that I have a Lomi, it's changed the way I think about my food waste. Lomi transforms my garbage into gold at the push of a button. Lomi is a countertop electronic composter that turns food scraps into dirt in under 4 hours. Now I love composting. Plus, it's made cooking at home even more fun. There's no food rotting in my garbage smelling up the kitchen. Thanks to Lomi, I only have to take out the trash like once a week, and it's hassle-free, mess-free, no more leaking bags. So here's something cool too. I turn my waste into nutrient-rich dirt that I can feed to my plants, my lawn, and my big garden in my backyard. That means it's not going to landfills and producing methane gas. I get to help the environment, and that makes my life easier. All my food scraps, plant clippings, and even those leftovers I forgot in the back of the fridge go back into my garden. Help me grow more nutritious food right in my backyard. I learned recently that food waste makes up a huge portion of our personal carbon footprint. So by reducing the amount of food I send to the landfill, I'm helping to do my part for the planet while also feeding my garden. So whether you want to start making a positive environmental impact or just grow a beautiful garden like mine, Lomi is perfect for you. So head to lomi.com/Fred and use the promo code FRED to get $50 off your Lomi. That's $50 off when you head to lomi.com/Fred and use promo code FRED at checkout. Thank you, Lomi, for sponsoring this episode of the show. Nowadays, when I drink alcohol, I don't bounce back the next day like I used to. So a lot of the time, I'll be the only person in the group not drinking, or I just end up skipping plans with friends altogether. That is until I discovered ZBiotics. Now, ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. So here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut where you need it most. Now, just remember to drink ZBiotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and then get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. The first time I tried ZBiotics was I was heading out to a night out and a great concert all night long. As instructed, I drank a bottle of ZBiotics before any alcohol, and I was amazed at how good I felt the next day. Every time I have a ZBiotics before drinking, it makes such a difference the next day. I mean, even after nice drinks the night before, I know I'll be able to get back to my daily routine. You know, like you guys know about my 3-mile daily walk or, just hitting my garden with ease. Give ZBiotics a try for yourself. Go to zbiotics.com/Fred to get 15% off your first order when you use code FRED at checkout. ZBiotics is back with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're not satisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember, it's simple. Just head to zbiotics.com/Fred. Use the code FRED at checkout for 15% off. And I gotta say, thank you, ZBiotics, for sponsoring our great episode. Segueing off that generalissimo order, right? The video and the Clay Higgins. I did a whole video on MeidasTouch about the Clay Higgins. I'm an old soldier. I was at Army for 22 years. I've followed the militia movement because I had people join it, friends. Because if you remember, Oath Keepers originally started off as military guys during the Obama administration because they were going to remember their oath against the socialists that are trying to take over our country. I've unfortunately had to deal with these assholes for years, even before anybody knew who the Oath Keepers were. In the book you say, the book's slow civil war, but I've also heard you say since the Trump indictments, things have sped up. Why do you say that? I mean, obviously the book came out a couple months ago. Do you think things are speeding up, and what does that mean?
I mean, I think there's this term that began on the left, accelerationism.
Yes.
And it was a bunch of Marxist intellectuals who, have a critique of liberal democracy, right? And, the critique's not idiotic, but the move that they make kind of is. They said, we need to dispense with this, we need to stop caring about the slow processes of democracy. So the fascists say, yeah, hey, I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
And this sort of accelerationism is the nature of the movement now, is whatever you have done, the thing to do is to try and speed up. Now, you said there's casualties already, and I think this is actually really important that a lot of people don't understand. There's casualties all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And it's certainly is pregnant people who, for lack of reproductive rights,
right,
are dying. And if you've heard a few of those stories in the news, every journalist knows for every one you hear, there's many more. I mean, there's been 5 police killings in Vermont in the last 10 years that I've lived here. None of them made national. I mean, they were bad killings. Right. All killings are bad, but none of them made national news because we don't have national media here, right? This is the same thing with people bleeding out, being denied coverage, folks, trans people being denied medical care. Not only, I'm hearing stories off the record, not only in red states, but in blue states, medical practices just saying, I'm reading the tea leaves. And so yes, I'm going to deny you medical care, yes, crucial medical care. A wave of queer and trans youth suicide, an epidemic. Now, no suicide can be attributed to any one cause like that, but we know enough now that these are kids who are like, I'm being targeted. Every trans kid in America is on the front line. And I say this, this is where I think a lot of people who might be maybe some never Trumpers like, well, I don't know, I have questions on that. Well, let me answer that question really simply with an old labor song. Which side are you on? Yep. Because every week in America, somewhere there's some group of oath breakers or 3%ers or Proud Boys lining up, oftentimes with guns, outside a school or a library, yep, a bar, and there's kids inside. Now, maybe you don't like Drag Story Hour, but pick your side. Are you with those kids or are you with the men with the guns?
That's the choice, right, at this point.
Yep. So we're hearing, we had that CPAC language. This is since the book came out where the guy was talking about we have to eradicate, yep, transgenderism. This is exterminationist language. And then we have Trump upping the ante of his own claim to divinity, saying that unless I come back to power, the world will be obliterated by nuclear war. I alone can stop it. Before, remember, he said, I alone can fix it. I alone can, help the economy. Now he's saying the world ends unless I'm back. Well, if you believe that, what are you willing to do for it? I think that's the acceleration that we're seeing in the penultimate chapter of the book where I travel around Wisconsin, yeah, and the guns are out. I mean, the guns are literally on the table. I walk into this man's house and he's preparing a militia training exercise, long guns. He's got a big handgun that he thought was a Dirty Harry gun. I looked it up. I did my research. He's wrong. It's not the gun Dirty Harry used, but it sure looks like it. His 20-something-year-old daughter was there. She had first used that gun when she was a small child. His 3-year-old is running around. His 3-year-old has already been trained on an AR-15. As proud dad says, now lying prone, of course, he's not old enough to heft the gun, but if he lies down, he can fire it. Those guns are out. There's more guns now in America than I've seen in 20 years of reporting. I'm not afraid of guns. I'm a gun owner. Vermont, people don't understand, is actually one of the best armed states in the union. Yeah. But this is a different level of intensity. This is simmering, and we are just sort of turning that heat up ever so slowly. But don't worry, because there'll be a tear-jerking story about a submarine to entertain you.
Entertain us. I think probably my last question. I think as we come out, I'd like to pull up to that 10,000 foot level. Right? It's like, I open with the polls to show this incredibly sharp divide in America, right, on single key issues, but these are key issues of our civil life. I mean, we don't disagree on tax policy anymore, Jeff. We disagree on fundamental civil rights, and frankly, as you know, the ability of certain people to even exist in our society. I had Charlotte Clymer on the show a few weeks ago. A transgender veteran. Literally, we're legislating my ability to exist, right? You've been immersed in the far right and the simmering violence for several years, as we've been talking about in this wonderful conversation. I think you kind of said this already, but I want to ask, are we asleep at the wheel thinking it's going to be okay? Because it ain't, is it?
It's not going to be okay. And I think the undertow of that book, of the book's title, both the currents that brought us here, I try and look at some of those currents, but it's also the current that I think is underneath so much of this, which is a kind of grief, right? We've lost a lot. Climate crisis. Look, the glaciers aren't coming back. The heat in Texas, that's going to keep happening. And we're going to live with that. And people are going to die, right? Those are casualties in our inability to address it. We've lost a lot in democracy. We found ourselves capable of what we knew in pockets was always there, but with the appeal of Trumpism, we know that we are not immune from fascism. And again, I appreciate the Never Trumpers because they, more than others, say, hey, look, the damage that's already been done is going to last for decades. Just the damage has already been done.
Right.
So the right is over there. They're also feeling those losses, but they're not processing that grief. They're letting it curdle into anger and rage, right? And then some of the liberals are over here denying it and saying, no, we can get back to normal. Instead of saying, hey, we've lost something, we can mourn it. Mourning is actually a hopeful process. Mourning is how when we lose something, we say we lost our beloved, right? Our dearly beloved, but we go on.
Yeah.
We go on and we make something new. And so in as much as we fail to mourn and acknowledge what we've lost and say, okay, what is the world that we're going to build now in these new circumstances, our condition? Or rather we pretend like I can't believe Morning Joe just yesterday, I'm listening to it. Is the Republican Party tiptoeing back to normality?
Jesus.
No, because it doesn't exist.
No.
That's gone. It's
No.
like saying,
Gone,
the million
dead.
dead of the pandemic aren't
Jesus.
coming back.
It's
the pandemic is over. Yeah, but the dead are still
delusional.
dead.
It's delusional.
They're gone. We mourn them and we build, or we curdle into deep trouble. And right now, the other metaphor I use is a little bit like it's all those guys with guns, they're not firing. So it's okay. No one's getting shot besides all the mass shooters, each of whom is writing a manifesto that tells you how to do it. But every time those guys with guns line up at some event, we're striking matches. And it hasn't flared yet. But normality, I'd like us just to stop striking matches. If we could take a pause from that for a week, we might breathe and start to think about what to do.
Wow. Well, that's a great place to start. Yeah, stop. So thank you. I mean, it is something I say often. It's funny. I was on the MeidasTouch podcast, myself, the Meidas Brothers, would be 2 years ago now on Memorial Day weekend. And I had a whole bit, it kind of went viral. It's kind of funny, actually, Brian Williams put a show, which is like normal's dead. Normal died when that giant orange asshole came down the escalator. And all this belief that we would just having him out of office would return us to normal is delusional. It's like a friend of mine is a sociologist explained the idea of the penetration exercise, where when a norm and tradition is penetrated, if you don't return it back by punishment and or tightening the laws, that new place becomes the norm, right? And I think in a lot of ways, I would complain to leaders who I very much still support, and I'm very proud to support in Washington, D.C., They seem to be missing the moment of understanding that it's not good enough just to be good at what they do. They actually have to punish. I think I'll end it with that. The idea, that story came out from Washington Post saying that Garland was worried about looking political by punishing Trump. Like, I got fucking bad news for you. People died. It was political violence, and violence, whatever caveat we put in the front of it, racist violence, political violence, sexual violence. Violence is violence. If you don't punish violence, there's more violence. And I feel like sometimes they don't understand that somehow they've carved out political violence as being a special get out of, well, that's different. It's not fucking different. People are dying and people are going to die. Well, man, what a great conversation, Jeff. I am so glad you took time for me. I know you have a really busy schedule, way to squeeze it in. And congratulations on the book. Of course, it's a bestseller. All of them are. And everything you have built, it's incredible and such an informative conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Fred. And thanks for the work you're doing.
I appreciate it, man. Let's talk some more. Good seeing you. Good luck.
Take care.
Bye. Well, that was terrifying. I was just telling Matt, oh my God. We do this show the way we do it. I want you to understand what's going on. And I hope you hear perspectives you haven't seen. And we have to understand what we're up against and what you've seen. I can't recommend this book enough. What you've seen from, by the way, I forgot to ask him. You can find him at Jeff Sharlet. JEFFSHARLET, single T on Twitter. He's there. He's terrific. He's been doing a lot of wonderful media appearances, so it was wonderful he took his time for us. But it's very important for those of us, especially if you're a liberal, if you're a progressive or Democrat, we really do need to understand what we're up against and not just write it off and not just ignore it, because if we're asleep at the wheel, we'll lose our democracy. If you can't convince your neighbors to vote for their democracy to save our country, again, the thing I say a lot on the show, makes people mad, is I don't necessarily need independents or Republicans to come over. I just really need Democrats to show the fuck up. And it's up to you and I. It's up to us who are activists. It's up to you and your neighborhood. It's up to you and your family. It literally is you getting your adult children to go vote and not blow this off, because our future truly, truly, truly is in danger. Read the book and you'll see exactly what the undertow is, and it ain't great. So thanks to our sponsors. We had some incredible, the sponsors we get in this show. It's so humbling. I know people aren't used to me having, sponsor breaks and commercials, but if you understand how this works, to produce this amazing show, to have Matt back there trying to get me to stop cussing and then turning my gibberish into actual clips and words, that costs money. So we're so very blessed that we have the sponsor to do this, so we can actually produce this show and I can do this for a living and help you. So I hope you'll check out our sponsors and support their products. I get them all. I love them. I won't put it on unless I've tried the product. And so I hope you'll try our wonderful, wonderful sponsors. In the meantime, I'm very proud to be part of the Forgotten Democrats. As you've heard a couple times now, I'm the national chairman for Forgotten Dems. We are actually launching with our first town hall this Thursday. If you saw our guest David Pepper on a few days, Dave and I are going to have another chat about what's going on in our country and how we have to vote, and we have to run people everywhere. I'd love you to join that this Thursday night. You can find out more information in a very simple way. All you do is text 33777. You text Fred, F-R-E-D, to 33777. You'll get a couple questions to sign up for our email, and then hopefully you'll sign up and join me at a wonderful Zoom town hall on Thursday night. I'd love you to join the movement. It is truly a movement. It's not just throwing money down a hole. A little bit of money goes a long way. As always, you can find me at FP Wellman. I'm still on Twitter, hanging in there. I poked the bear of the Joe Rogan, RFK Jr., Bill Maher world, and got creative. It was kind of funny. You know, things are going crazy. People on Twitter, people are like messaging me on Facebook, say, "Dude, man, you're getting rocked on Twitter." And it's like there's like 12 replies. Like, dude, I get called a dick every day. So anyway, but it's FP Wellman. Also on Instagram, we're FP Wellman Official. The show is On Democracy Pod on Twitter. On Democracy Podcast. Little secret, you can go check. We have a YouTube channel with every show we've ever done. Even before I joined the wonderful MeidasTouch network, all of our shows we've done in studio are on our On Democracy Podcast on YouTube. But again, always new shows are coming out on the MeidasTouch network where you can't miss them, and have a wonderful community you can talk to in the comments and enjoy your time. As always, we're available Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon. My God, we're everywhere. So I hope you'll subscribe. As you know, the algorithm on these things works a simple way. If you like the show and you subscribe to the show and share the show, more people will see the show. And we've had some wonderful, wonderful growth and more people joining our community. I am on Substack as well, fpwellman.substack.com. That's a larger community. You'll get the show a whole day early on there. And plus we do cool stuff. So all the places you can find us. As always, we're sponsored by our friends at Vi Media. We're right here in their studio, Half Coast Studios. Vi Media is a wonderful digital marketing partner, national and local here in St. Louis. They're growing fast. It's VIE.media. That's all I've got to say. It's a lot. What a great show. I hope you'll buy Jeff's book. I hope you'll join us online and have a conversation. And more importantly, I cannot wait to see you next week. I hope you have a wonderful July 4th weekend. Independence Day is coming up, and so important for those of us who served. So proud to be an American, proud to fly my American flag in spite of what conservatives say about me. I am a proud son of America. My father was a Marine. My grandfather was World War I. We had a Civil War sailor. We had a Revolutionary War Minuteman who served in Massachusetts. I've been doing this for a long time in my family, so I cannot wait for Independence Day. I hope you enjoy it with your family. Stay safe, stay aware, get in the fight. Talk to you next week.